All right, there it is. All right, this is Tom Hart. We're at the Sequential Artists Workshop. This is Comics Karma, and I'm here with.
Lauren Weinstein, coming to you live from New Jersey. Beautiful New Jersey.
And this is the only podcast, as far as I know, that is documenting the last few months of Lauren Weinstein's calamity. No other podcast does this. And
That's true, thank God.
and so, Lauren, last week we left it. You had just gotten not only approval, but a kind of like a blessing from your foreign friends, not foreign, but they're overseas now, your high school friends who said, yeah, this is your thing. It doesn't matter if we're combined into different characters and all that stuff. We talked about that. And we
Yeah.
talked about time traveling and sort of this parallel living that you get to do with your teenage self. And so where are you at with it now?
I am deep in the process of this. I have a wonderful deadline, which is on Monday. I'm going to Yaddo. Okay.
And Yado
So,
is a residency where you get to chill out and be
yeah,
pampered,
right.
right?
hmm
And so
They,
I'm,
they bring you lunch there, right? Like they leave
it,
lunch on your
I think McDowell, they give you a lunch box, but some
uh
deliver lunch to you. And yeah, I mean, they make all your food. So I have two big responsibilities right now: to be as present as possible as a parent before I go away again, and especially with my like 8-year-old. But I also am trying to, I've gone back to this earlier chapter in my book, and I'm just trying to get all of the art finished. And just, I'm revisiting this story because it's going to, having this story completely finished and scanned in is going to really fill out my book. And a lot of these pages I was like 3/4 done with. So it's really great work. If it's feeling like I'm actually doing something that's working towards being finished. I'm not mulling over ideas. I'm just like painting and the pages are getting done. And so it's feeling good. And my goal is to get all these pages scanned and updated in my big InDesign file by the time I go. So then I really do have, what I'm bringing to Yaddo is the 30-page acid trip story that I can paint and finish that and be really impressive for the people at Yaddo. So they'll be like, oh, that looks good. Um, like you really have your shit together. But then also I have all of this material. I have like this, the secrets of the last two chapters seem to be really coming, I got all of this approval and this bolstering from my friends from high school that are like, push this story to the edge. You're writing this story, like go for it. So those are the things I feel like I'm in a very good place this week.
Awesome.
But I
Okay.
have one little addendum to that, which I went to Emily Flake's, she's a fantastic cartoonist. She had um Julia Wirtz, also a fantastic cartoonist, who was in town, and the two of us spoke to her grad class, and I showed a whole chapter from my book, or I showed a lot of little things, and one student was like, okay, so when you get this book to a final editor, what if they want to make a lot of changes? And I was like, I keep being sort of dumbstruck, like having these like just blank reactions to things, and I didn't quite know what what to say. So I said last night, well, if an editor wanted to make a lot of changes, I wouldn't want to be with that editor. I'd go with a different editor, because at this point there's not a lot of changes that I want to really make. And but then I thought about it and I was like, well, what if I really trusted the editor? And I felt like this was a well, then that would change it. So, but I think these are, maybe it's not helpful to visualize these things, but I kind of hadn't really thought about it until the student had asked the question. And which is really depressing. Like there's so many things that are, I can't believe I've been working on this thing for so long and I haven't like asked myself these like really fundamental questions.
Well, I wondered this myself because I noticed this in having been in a words, no pictures world for a long time, and then entering the words and pictures world. I did notice among graphic novelists that they got pretty far along in their work independently, whereas it's kind of expected in the words, no pictures world that, you know, in the days when editors read really closely like we're really involved in the writer's process. I don't know if it's like that. Um, People responded to their editors and did stuff, but I did notice in the words and pictures world that, asking somebody to change something uh, at a certain stage was just like it seemed like an almost impossible request, Everything is so woven together from the beginning to say, well, you should take out, have you considered taking these 20 pages out? Was
Right.
very different than saying, I think you could get more quickly from chapter 1 to chapter 3. So I am curious about that. So your editor hasn't been involved up until this point in shaping the story.
My agent has a little bit, but my editor kind of maybe doesn't exist yet and maybe does. I'm not quite sure because we may be
Oh,
selling the book to somebody else. So
Oh.
so these are like my agent has given me the directive to finish the book entirely before we go forward, which makes sense because I've been working on it for 20 years. I'm sure she's a little bit like, not
I'm just
sure
a
you're
little
gonna
late in
actually
the
finish
story. I apologize.
it. So, so I- anyway, I find myself answering people's questions in this podcast and then thinking about my own answers to them and being like, what am I doing? Having any good advice for anybody, but that's okay. Um, Also, I keep thinking about Abel's question of when something is finished, and I realized that actually when I think something is finished is when I think it's going to look good on a wall. When a page actually
Mm.
framed and look good on a wall,
Mhm.
that's when it's finished. And then I was thinking, well, that's the stupidest idea in the world. You're doing it for print. Why did you get hung up on that? So, uh, I don't know.
That's why I think you're good to answer these questions, Lauren, is because you're not 100% convinced of your answers.
Yes, don't,
And I
don't
think that's
rely
what
on
you
me for anything.
I think that's what you want. All right. Well, we've got to segue. Our interlocutor today, our questioner today is Robert Danberg. And we should just hear from you, Robert. What's on your mind?
Gosh, I feel like, well, I'm on The Price is Right. I should race down the aisle. So take my place. But my question is related to this, I guess, but at the other end of the process. 20 years ago, I guess,
Hmm.
knock wood, when it takes me 20 years to finish the book I have in mind, uh, I'm still spry enough to enjoy the party. So, um, my question had to do with really how to get started. I began my own journey in this world about 4 or 5 years ago by essentially taking, what did I take first? How to Make a Holy Book. That was the first class I took at SAW, and I had been in the world of words only and felt like I'd exhausted my ability. I just was at a dead end in what I was doing and discovered this world by reading Tom's book, Rosalie Lightning, and reading Syllabus, which I found both accidentally in the library. It turns out my public library has a great graphic novel section. And over the last several years, felt like I was doing this apprentice work through Saw, learning how to draw. I have more memories now than I did at the beginning of having, looked at comics and had comics be a part of my,
Hmm.
in my retina somewhere.
Hmm.
As I started to see, oh, right, as you know how you draw, and then all of a sudden, Beetle Bailey pops out you know, right? Because you read it as a kid so much, or Mad Magazine, and you're like, oh, that's Sergio Aragones. Where did that come from? And you remember. And then, over time, I found, oh, there's this thing, um, graphic poetry. And graphic novel sounds right. Graphic poetry sounds a little odd to me. So visual poetry, I don't know what it's called. This is part of my thing right now. Part of my question is, where do I fit in? Uh, wh where does my work belong? Um, and now, after several years of what felt like practice, I
Mm,
began to make work that I felt like, oh, this looks like this feels done, right? In a way that had when I felt like I knew what I was doing as a poet. I could tell when I was finished, right?
mm,
I developed an instinct for, oh, this is what I'm working towards. And so I've now, over the last couple of years, produced work I felt like people could see, right? That wouldn't require me standing over them saying, I know I didn't do that well, but this is what I meant, Uh, you know? And so that's where my question came from is, how to step out of the private world of being a student, right? Um, uh,
mm, mhm.
or thinking of myself as somebody just learning, and saying thank you for looking at this, right? To somebody who's like, oh, I feel like I have enough work that looks like it could be a collection, and um, still sort of thinking in I was a part of I guess, the academic world. Poetry really kind of exists in the academic world, and then it exists in the other world. But in the academic world, it's pretty well circumscribed. You sort of know what the path is. I've had a lot of people, several people recently have said to me, oh, my book is getting published, and then apologized for the press, right?
Mm,
That the press was too small, right? And I would say, oh, geez, never apologize for an accomplishment like getting a book published. And now that I've been involved in this world, I understand publication very differently,
mm,
audience very differently, and gatekeepers very differently. So I guess that's the long way around of saying, how do I make this transition to, producing um, a collection of poetry, of visual poetry, or graphic poetry, whatever the genre is called, um, and finding a place for it in the world. I know that, uh, Lauren, you'd said in an email, do you have an Instagram or whatever? And I'm like, I have a folder, but like it's a real folder, you know, you know, and a bunch of pictures from uploading to Saw, so people could see it. So I guess, um, what is the best way to put it, Tom? Do I say, where do I go now? Or, what does that path look like? Or what can that path look like? I'm, I guess, it used to be very clear to me in the
mm,
world I
mhm,
came from. You paid $25 for the lottery ticket of getting your book accepted, right?
mhm,
Because
mhm.
that's what it's like in the fiction and poetry world, the literary fiction and poetry world. But the poetry world precisely is all about making a collection, submitting it, especially if you want to be a rock star, right? Because and a friend of mine once told me, as an academic, he said, everybody wants to be a rock star, but there are really only a couple of rock stars,
Always.
right? And most of us are just independent bands, playing to the 27 people who loved our first record in college, I guess. But you get what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what the path is. I can't envision it. Right now, my world is I make this work, I upload it to Saw, right? And I wait to hear back. And then I'm really, the last piece I uploaded I felt like a real breakthrough to me. And people were like, yeah, Popeye, that's great. And I felt like, yeah, I'm here. I did it. I know where I'm at. And then I thought, I don't know what to do next, right? I don't know that maybe there's more to it than this. So that's my tight seven plus my question.
My 27. Switching genres again. Lauren,
Well,
I bet you've got something to say.
Okay, so first of all, the idea of poem comics is one that always intrigues me. And what I love about it is that poems see, it seems like their whole role is to do everything with words. And so when you move your poem into, push it more into the world of pictures, like what happens to the poem? And so first of all, I'm just very, very interested in that. And I'm also interested in how poets feel about poem comics. and um and I have a friend who is a poet, and she is in the academic world, and she gets her books published by pretty nice little, like a publisher called Copper Canyon.
that's a
And
great, great press. That's like an aspirational press. It's got,
so
That's one you
then
don't apologize for, huh?
yes, it's when you don't, like Grey Wolf. You don't apologize for that.
so, so then I'm wondering, would they ever public, like, where's the, when you're thinking about an audience, would a poetry press print the first graphic poetry collection? Like, so that's, those are, you're setting yourself apart in a way from the rest of this academic world of poets to make these. So that's, one, these are like three different responses I have. Like, that is just so cool that you're doing this, and that you feel that it's finished in a way that you didn't feel that you understood with just poetry. Like, that's
Mhm.
fantastic. That in itself is something to feel great about. And then the reason why I asked you if you had an Instagram was that, well, that's just how most people now get their workout.
Mm.
And could, or, and that's problematic in a lot of ways too, and maybe it's not worth it, but is it worth it to try out one of these poem comics that you have on Instagram to see if, what an audience response would be like? And your Instagram would be very new, so like, would you get any response? Like, those questions are, but I think, just like, you were saying that when you first started, the way to get to the next phase was pretty clearly delineated. I feel the same way when I first started teaching at SVA a million years ago. I felt like I could show people a path to getting their work published that I don't quite know now,
Mm.
especially with something as esoteric as poem comics. The thing about poem comics is that they really, really seem so promising to me. I always feel like working on comics is a kind of, I love to take the poetic angle, these, the spaces between words, or the gutter. There are these things that happen with both media that are so interesting. And when you juxtapose them, I don't know, it seems like there's so much potential there. So I'm just pontificating. So first of all,
No.
the classic thing now is, where might you find your audience?
Mm.
So that may be the first question I would ask you. Like, I laid out a couple different pathways, but where do you think you might go to find an audience?
Well, gosh, it's difficult for me to say for all of the reasons that you described, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I've done, I got my hands. There was the journal. Bianca Stone, I think, was the editor of Ink Brick, right? And which was poetry comics.
Mhm.
And they had like a 16 issue run or something, and I bought all 16 issues, and I got my hands on everything that I could read, right? But so I could see, well, what were people doing, and what did it look like? And often, I can't, I was trying to think of her name. I had like a bout of COVID a few weeks ago, and my brain still insists that nothing happened before I got sick. So she's wonderful. I think she's published by Drawn and Quarterly. She did this beautiful book. First, it was her first book was about her sensitivity to electricity, like an environmental sort of thing. Her second book had a lot to do with Astrid Lindgren. I cannot remember her. Julia Delport. Does that
Oh
sound
Yeah,
yeah,
familiar?
yeah.
right.
And like I read that and I thought, oh, that's poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that was memoir, right? And when I read Rosalie Lightning, when I reread it, I thought, oh, this is poetry. There are sections of it that do what I would hope I could do, which
Mm.
is, have, the way the ink is used and the words work together. It seems like a seamless lyric whole, right? So I see places where things happen, but I tend to think it couches it's within the context of something that's not understood as poetry in the way that when I got an MFA, you knew the different poets. When poets wanted to write prose, they wrote memoir, right? They and so I don't really know. It's very, very difficult for me. Inkbrick doesn't even exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a couple of presses that I saw that did where there are collections. People understand themselves doing poetry comics. But my inspiration, I'm always trying to hang on. I'm always trying to get people to read this book. So it's called Life or Theater
Oh,
by
sure.
Charlotte Solomon.
Oh
And
yeah.
I started to see that in the visual arts world, you know, Basquiat, uses words and symbols and so I could see where it fit in that. And I
Mm-hmm.
could see in the poetry world, um, there are people who are starting to maybe include an image that they drawn or an image of their
Mhm.
kids in it, but it won't dictate the way they deal with the white space around. And that's what became the thing that I had trouble with is I didn't words were either just floating around in this big space or they were confined to a little rectangle in the middle.
Right.
Right. So there's a world of concrete poetry, you know, where,
Mhm.
some like there's a book by John Hollander called Types of Shape. And it's those, all the poems look like the thing they're writing about, right? And then there's a book called Olio, a really wonderful book called Olio, where that uses the graphic space in stunning ways, but it's still words and the page, right? So it's difficult for me to answer your question because I really haven't come across yet, you know, something that where they where the press thought of itself as, like you said, does Copper Canyon have an imprint, right? Or where they're like, we're going to try and push poetry comics out there and see
Or
if
maybe not an imprint, like a imprint of one.
an imprint of one, right? I haven't. It's just not something I've quite come across yet.
Yeah, yeah.
And then regarding, you know, I learned that all the people that I loved their work at, who were my, I guess, I saw them as real. We were talking about who's real earlier, but they probably saw themselves as colleagues and fellow students. But, I'd see this great work on Instagram and I couldn't figure out, like, how do you do something where people have to go in this direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or where, because poetry comics being what they, unlike poems, often extend beyond a single page or image, right? They have that thing that poetry gives you, which is a way to deal with reading time and psychological time in this different way. Because you're not going like this and then back up and down. You really are going with the grid and then leaping across the space between the pages. And so and that's where I just kind of got off the bus, I guess. That was like, oh, this could be a learning curve too far for me. I don't know, you know. So that's another reason why I'm here. Like, I really, the background to my question is, you know, I came from a pencil and paper and typewriter and I mean, world, right? So you make your work and then you pile it up and then you send it to somebody else who decides, right?
Right.
The editor who decides, right? And so I think
Well,
your response was an answer for me, is what I'm saying.
I've got some ideas. Can I throw some out?
Please,
All
please
right.
stop me before I say too much, please.
So that was your tight 7, your tight 15.
Sorry
Um,
about that. I can't help myself.
um, I think the path to creating an audience at this stage is it has always been a little bit kind of the same, actually, and that is like build a small network of friends and peers and also people who notice you. And one way you do that is taking classes, and you've been doing that. And another way is showing up for something like this, the podcast, because like, a year later, people are gonna be like, who's that poet guy that was on Lauren and Tom's podcast? Let's look him up, right? So, you'll just be in the ether a little bit. But another way is to, and I mean, this has worked for decades or centuries, is to contact the people that have inspired you, Bianca Stone or David Lasky or whoever, and send them your work and say, hey, I just really love the new book you put out. Here's one of mine. And they'll put it in a pile of works by, fellow students that they're paying attention to, and it'll go into their brain and maybe dissipate, but then the next time you run into them or communicate with them, they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember the first book you gave me, and then the second book, and then they'll stick with them. And slowly, if you continue doing things like that, you slowly become one of these comic poet people.
Mhm.
Another way is to look for outlets that might take the work and publish it. And we're always, I know this is true of Lauren too, we're always keeping our ear out, wondering who the hell's publishing things these days. It's always changing. For a long time, Lauren was in The Stranger, and then she was in the Village Voice. Like, I don't know at what point Lauren knew that the Village Voice was closing, but I'm sure she was like, I got to get in there fast because they're going under. But like
Absolutely.
we know like, okay, this place is publishing right now, and that place we heard there was a editorial change, and maybe there'll be something, and and this industry is collapsing, but there's one guy who will still like publish you. We're always trying to pay attention to that. And right now, there seems to be a lot of like online things and things on Substack. We just had a lot of SAW students get published in the gutter, both in their print anthology and online. And so it seems like the gutter is actively taking some missions, and I imagine they're open-minded enough that they would take some poetry comics, which I think is the actual term that people are using more these days, poetry comics. But
Okay.
um, and then there's Crucial Comics, which just opened up recently, and like in a sort of like I'm keeping my ear to the ground sort of way. Like Crucial seems really interested in creating a thriving scene. And I don't know if poetry comics is their thing, but it might be. But also Googling around poetry comics and finding out where they're showing up. And I bet they're also showing up. It's just kind of searching around and seeing like who might be amenable to publishing this stuff. And I bet there are some university art and literary online magazines. Maybe they're just online, but I bet there are places that are already publishing poetry comics. And again, you look at, you go to Bianca Stone's website, or you go to our friend Kelsey Ervick's website and find out where they've run some of their pieces. You'll see it on their website. Oh, this ran in LitHub, or this ran in whatever. And then you sort of um, cobble together a sort of list of places that might be amenable. And sometimes you'll find that like, oh, it was all one editor because that one editor kept bouncing
Right.
around publications, and that happens too. And then you just latch onto that editor. But there are other options too, like Ithaca. You're in Ithaca. It's huge. I know they have open mic nights in Ithaca. Buy yourself a $30 projector and go there and say, hey, I'm doing poetry comics. I know it's open mic night. All I gotta do is plug this in and plug this in. Can I show my pictures while I read my poem? They'll be like either what, or they'll be like, yeah, that's great. And you just sort of slowly build up a local audience too. And then you also make sure you have zines to sell at the end of the night, or not sell, give them away.
Mhm. Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I thought I had a couple more on the list, but that's a start.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's in a way, that's exactly the kind of thing all put together that I need to hear.
I also think that kind of visualizing what I mean, I feel like the format of poetry comics could be so specific. What are the dimensions? are they things that you see in print, or are they things that you see in a slideshow format online? And how do they function? And so you having like a clear idea of where people encounter these things and how they exist, will give places for them, like a publisher might become clearer to you as you make these things feel, more concrete yourself.
Mm.
For example, like last night I was at Emily Flake's class, and it was the last day of their grad class, and a couple people had just handmade zines. Like every single page was just pasted up. They made these collage zines, or they watercolored things, and they weren't necessarily that like legible, but gosh, they were just beautiful objects. They were incredible objects, and they were finished objects. And and it I had forgotten just how lovely a zine can be, and how actually one of the women's zines was, she had, she's like a little bit over 50 and realized that she'd lived half of her life. And so the whole zine was about what she was going to do with the rest of her life. And it seemed something so significant about that. So part of me thinks like fully making kind of an artist book out of your poetry comics might give you a really, really good concrete sense of what this thing is, like how many pages is it? And maybe it's not like a whole collection. Maybe you take like 3 or 4 of your favorite ones, the ones that you've made breakthroughs with, and you make this into this beautiful object. And then maybe there's somebody who wants to sees that and wants to print it as a, either an anthology. And then maybe, once you scan it in, you can also start to crop it and see it as a slideshow or something like that. I think either, if you like working on pen and paper, I think continue to do that. Like don't try and contort what you're doing for some sort of online audience or something, like if that works, that works, but keep really grounding yourself in the process that's working for you as well, I think.
Great answers, you two. This is great. This is great. Keep
How
going.
does that sound to you? Do you think, does that sound like something that makes sense? Like actually like,
Oh, it does. It makes me think about the things that I've been doing. There's a local press. It's called Illuminated Press. Illuminatedpress.org, everybody. The Laura Rowley, the person who does the work, she's just wonderful. And there's in the literary festival next weekend, they're doing a zine and book fair. Laura is organizing this, and I volunteered to set up tables. So I guess that's the way you kind of get started, knowing people who are doing the things that you really admire, right?
100%.
And then being around the people who are local, who are going to sell their wares from the tables, right? And envisioning, it made me think as you were talking, Lauren, that I've gotten used to seeing everything flat on the screen. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I don't want it to bend in the middle. I want people just to see it. And I think that's why you want to see it you visualize it on the wall in a way, is that, it's not supposed to bend in the middle. You're supposed to see the whole thing all the way to the edge.
and what does a 2-page spread look like when these
Yeah.
two things are facing each other? That's a whole
Yeah,
lot.
it doesn't seem right when it goes like that. So, but also listening to what both of you have said, I also thought about the thing that's probably true for many of the people here is making that leap to imagining yourself as someone who's making work other people want to see, you know? Like I realized, it made me think back to when the opening question was like I think of it all as apprentice work, apprentice work, apprentice work. I had a very long arc of writing with just words, and then this very short arc And I am very much enculturated in the world of somebody else tells you when you're ready or good.
Mm.
But this is a world where people, I've learned, you know, because I'm 60, right? And I think back and I think I missed so many things that, like, I could have read your work and Tom's as a contemporary, like not that far ahead of you in the years, I think, you know. But it was like I missed hip hop too. I lived in New Jersey, and it was being hip hop was being invented across the bridge, and I was listening to classic rock on WNEW. So, you know, I feel like I'm entering into a world that I've spent a lifetime not knowing about, with completely different rules about how you decide, hey, why shouldn't somebody else think of this as something that they would like to see? And so I guess probably underneath this is that question too, is crossing that bridge with yourself, you know?
The George Washington Bridge to New
The
York.
George Washington
We
Bridge, yeah.
we all come from self-publishing. We've
Yeah,
all self-published a ton. I mean, maybe learn a little less so, I think, right? Because I mean, but anyway, either way, like you give yourself permission and you make the thing with whatever funds you have, and then you get it into as many hands as you can.
Mm,
And when the rules of that game change, you'll know, and you just change it a little, but then you'll probably go back to it. Even Gary Panter, who invented half of our culture, still self-publishes these days. So like self-publishing is a long tradition. It just needs one person, you, to approve of it. That's definitely a place to start.
mm,
and I think the fact that you said that you knew that this thing was finished, I keep coming back to that. Like you're already on your way.
yeah.
Like that's a huge deal. Like to know when something is done and not have some
Hmm.
tastemaker say that this is done. Like you knew it. So if you know that, then you're ready to put that into a zine of some sort.
Oh, so interesting. So interesting.
I'll tell you one
Uh,
other thing real fast, and that's that, we get a lot of people in the graphic novel program here, and a lot of them, they don't say comics poetry exactly, but a lot of them will say, what I'm doing isn't exactly comics. Is that okay? You know? And what they mean is it's more like unbelonging by I always when I'm on the podcast I always forget names, um but it's a mixture of collage, it's a mixture of story and ideas, excuse me, and words and pictures maybe that float a little bit more and aren't necessarily driven by the narrative of the boxes and things like that. In other
Nora Krug.
Yeah, Laura, yeah, thanks. And
Nora.
Nora, right, thanks. And in other words, I think the audience is building for this kind of thing, and more
Me
people are
too.
going to be saying, "Oh, you do this too. I do this," and there'll be more sharing involved and more
mm,
people out there. So trust in that.
right.
Absolutely. And I think that there is a hunger for different types of, anything that a publisher can sell at this point is what they want to sell. So if you're sort of doing something that's a crossover, some editor out there will find it. But I think the question of whether or not you're ready almost shouldn't exist, because it's like you're ready when you've made that first comic, and then you make, it's a process. It's like all you have to do now is take your three best comics and
Mhm.
print them out and lay them into a zine, and then it's a book, and then maybe somebody else will want to print it.
This is funny. It reminds me of something a poetry teacher told me when I was in MFA school. Was like, she said, I don't know if you want to wait, sort of like the implication was we want to waste this on a chapbook because you might want to put it in a book, and if you publish it as a chapbook, it like you won't be allowed to like whatever the rules of contests were, right? Whether something counted as previously
Right,
published.
published, yeah.
And when I was telling you, it's just reminding me, it's the like a teacher that I really admire, Thomas Lux, I had as a teacher, as a poet. He started by making, what essentially were what we would call self-published zines, something that we're at a run of 30. And,
Mhm.
he ended up, of course, with like his new and selected Knopf or something. But I forget that even the poetry world that I came from had a long history of, you know, like Grove Press or City Lights, little books, where someone printed 100. It's weird how you forget what you know because you think it doesn't apply to you because you're not real. And it gets back to that, I guess. That's everybody else but there's probably a hurdle I have to leap that I don't know yet.
I
Right.
think I have maybe a thought of what that one of the hurdles might be, which is actually putting together a stupid zine and having the technical wherewithal to Xerox it when you have
See, you're dating yourself by saying Xerox.
Yeah.
right. No, no,
Say that in
absolutely.
class, and people say to me, like, what do you mean Xerox? I'm like, just print it. That's what I mean. Print it. Print
It's
many copies of it.
yes, print many copies. So yeah, absolutely. Like I remember crying at Kinko's, like not trying to figure out how to pagine everything and
Oh my God. That's so funny. Like, how do I get this so it shows up in the right direction on both sides? I bet
yeah, it's the most
breaking my
basic,
head.
it's the most basic and humbling thing. And yet it really helps you understand how to just make what it is you're trying to make.
Mm.
Like it's not you're not like getting into these highfalutin ideas of whether or not you're a real artist. You're like just trying to make this stupid thing and make it look good. And like Ron Rigi was a master of that. He would put new toner into the Xerox machine to make it almost like a Rizzo machine. So there I think the nuts and bolts of that, the craft of making that might actually just take you in a new direction in terms of uh just making this thing.
Mhm.
And then from there you have it, and then you can move into this next world. Like you can give it to people, you can send it to people, maybe you put it online, you see how that works. Like maybe there's another place that could run it because they have it and they'll scan it for you, maybe. uh, so I don't know. I think just engaging in the practice rather than worrying about exactly where it's going to go, because then
Mhm.
it's like
Mhm.
a thing, it's real then.
That
um
is very wise. Thank you.
Yeah. It's almost Buddhist or Talmudic or something where you're just like the path may be invisible, but you have to be on it, or something like that.
Nicely
Like,
said.
and I think Lauren's right, engage with that process of making the physical thing and that'll help get it going. All of these steps are possible and productive steps to take.
Yeah, Jeannie says on this chat, what about a simple animation or slideshow that is saved as a specific timed experience that might solve the reader movement from image to image? Like, that's totally another way to go. Like, you could do everything online and never print a thing. Like that could work. But I would just kind of look at this thing that you felt like was finished and examine it and say, where does this go? Like, where do I want to is this a printed object? Does it go online and test the waters? There's no real rules about that. Like,
You can let yourself be brash too. If you're helping set up tables at this literary festival, leave a copy on every table. Like, so people show up at 9 a.m. and they're setting up their table. They're like, "What's this?" And everybody's got your poetry comic, and two of those people will save it, and whatever. Or you can be like the people now. It's getting to be a regular thing at comics festivals where people set up outside of it, or they bring in a bootleg table inside, and those are always the most popular tables. So, you can just be brash and semi-secretive, but also have a neon sign saying "Crazy Man with Poetry Comics."
there, yeah. My first,
My hobby is crazy man. Now have a kind of a subtitle now. So
it feels so good to be crazy to do something like this and be like, no, this is my job. Like I try to figure out how to copy this book. Like it just it's like that's what some really good Pat Schuchard, who was my painting teacher at Washington University, said, artists don't have to wait in line. And I love that idea because it like, yeah, you're waiting online, but actually you're also drawing in your sketchbook, or yeah, you're at the copy shop, but you're making art. Um, and and
Yeah.
and I think that that is such a nice way. It really is a kind of a freedom in where we the world that we live in right now. The first thing that I assign to my students when I teach this design and build class at School of Visual Arts is a calling card, so that if you met somebody who could publish your work in an elevator, it would be here's what you'd give them. But the calling card is basically like a mini comic. It's something and they have 1 week to do it, so they have to figure out the technical aspects of what they're doing very, very quickly. The easiest one is that one that you take one 8.5 by 11 page and you fold it, and so that it becomes an 16 page mini comic.
Eight.
Is
Oh,
it
no,
eight?
it's eight, I think. Yeah. You cut it
Eight.
in the middle, the O cut. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly, the O cut. Are you familiar with this?
Mhm.
Yeah. So so maybe that's just, you could do that for this poetry festival. I mean, yeah, the one that you're setting up chairs for, you could make a calling card that has your
Oh,
email just with that, you know. And one of the best ones that a student ever gave me was Allie Erica, who is now making fantastic comics professionally herself. But she got a set of lighters, and she attached to each lighter a scroll comic about every single time when she was young that she came across fire. And she seemed to
Oh
be,
my
oh,
God.
you're
yes,
killing me now. That's
I know.
fabulous.
And it was so good. And she would just put them around and somebody would find them. And so they would have a lighter, but then, and she had there's a lot of tension in her relationship with fire, as you might imagine, as many people have tension in their relationship with fire. But it's what a great kind of metaphor for growing up in a certain way. And I think it, it was just really a well-written piece as well. So there's like a conceptual object that's a comic and a poem, and what the heck is it? I don't know. But so I think it's really okay to be working on the borders of all these things, you know.
Mhm.
See, I'm glad I didn't call in sick. Got too nervous and was like, I can't make it. I've got a fever. This is fabulous. This has been great.
Yeah, and pretty soon you'll be given the same advice to younger comics poets out there. It'll be like, oh, you want to know what the path is? Well, it's complicated, but have a seat, you know. No, yeah. Do you think you've got some steps forward
Yeah,
now?
what's your concrete step? What are you going to do when you leave this?
Well, I was telling you about Illuminated Press, and I have been taking lessons with her, like once a month, to learn how to make books. Right. So she taught me how to make an accordion book. She
Oh,
taught me how to make a sewn bound book, and I don't know what it's called, but I shared with her one of my comics. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Because it's 8.5 by 11, and it kind of looks like a children's book, but it's grown-up stuff. So she's going to teach me something where it's front and back, where I can put them together and bind them. And I've been always thinking of these things as, like I said, like I'm taking lessons, I'm taking classes. I never have been thinking of them as more than, oh, I'll practice this some more and then I'll be able to. But I think that maybe that'll be my first step. I'll learn how to do this and I'll make more than one,
Yes,
right?
mm-hmm.
definitely.
And I'll do I'll go down to Buffalo Street Books and say, could you just put 20? I don't care. Keep everything, right?
Mhm.
Sell it for 50 cents or give it away. Can I put this here? And or like you said, just leave it around town. It reminds me, I shared with the class a zine that I found in a coffee shop that was just affirmations. And, you know, I only had the one, but I was like, can you imagine making something that you just give away? It doesn't even have a person's name on it.
Hmm.
They just wanted me to have this in case I felt down. But listening to you here, I'm starting to think, oh, that person is somebody I could get to know. That person is somebody I could, like, I can do the same thing. You know, I guess I have to challenge that enculturation that, like I guess I said, was you wait for somebody to tell you, you know,
Right.
whether you're done or whether that thing is worthy, and become more brash, a little bit more bold, and just, you know, print it and give it away,
Hmm.
right? Share it with people. Figure out how to work Instagram, right? Do what Jeannie said, oh, what would it be like if it just took people right through it? How can I do that? You know. But I think my first step is my next lesson is on May 26th. So
Great.
I'm going to go and I'll talk to her about, okay, so what if I wanted to make more of these than just the one you taught me how to bind together? And I'm sure she will share her knowledge freely. And then I'll go from there. That will be my first.
Can
And
I give you an additional homework assignment, which is print
Yes.
out print out all of what you have, like if you have, I don't know if you lay things out with text or if you handwrite things, but print it out and bring it there too, because there may just be literally cutting and pasting that you do
Mhm.
that
That
day.
could be the case. I have just the one. This is the thing, like you were saying about Xeroxing things.
Mm-hmm.
That I have to also uh, face the, you know, I'm used to the artifact just being this one thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? The one thing you make. There aren't duplicates.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I have to start engaging with a little my sort of my fear of a certain kind of technology that is probably no more than putting something on the glass and
Yeah.
pressing start, but feels to me like, oh my God, change my own oil? Are you crazy?
You're
Yeah.
gonna be the crazy guy with the books, and is
See, another subtitle, right? I'll get a button. I'm the crazy guy with the poetry comics
with the
books.
poetry comics, exactly. And that
Mm.
and it just takes one editor to look at that and be like, wow, this thing is finished, it's on the page, it's so easily could go into my
Hmm.
thing. So
See, this is the joy of being here that I've discovered in this community, because I think part of what happened to me was that, you start to feel very isolated when you feel like you can't, you know,
Hmm.
figure out your which direction is north, and you can't figure it out. But ever since I entered this world, I've just found all of these people who are extraordinarily generous. And the people I think of as, oh, they're real, or, are people who just give what they know away and don't even think of it as giving anything away. It's just, oh, are you hungry? There's plenty here for everybody. So
Right.
I'm very, very grateful to have gotten to get my question answered here, and to be, this is just not the kind of thing you usually hear in the world that I usually inhabit.
Mm.
You're more likely to hear reasons why not than reasons why. You should just go ahead and do it. So really, thank you very much.
Yeah. I like to hear that. Maybe, Lauren, maybe some episode we can reserve for like lots of backbiting and
no,
negativity and things like that. But
So like right, this is the guy behind the curtain.
you one person is going to come on the podcast and be like, no, you know what, you shouldn't do this.
Yes, I've been
You
listening for an hour. Yeah, my sense is that maybe you shouldn't. So
thanks, Robert. This has been great.
no, thank you.
And Lauren, we're taking a week off so you can get settled at your residency, but then you're going to be deep in the acid trip painting part of your
Oh
story,
my
right?
gosh, it'll be so exciting.
Okay.
What I'm hoping, my goal will be that I take this filter off of my Zoom, whatever this thing is, and so that the things that I show you will be in focus. And in behind me will be a wall of gorgeously painted originals.
All right. Something to look forward to in 2 weeks. Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming
Thanks.
to.
This has been great. I love this. I can't wait to see your zine. Mail me one.
Yeah, obviously, we're all waiting for it. So, and mail it to us, COD. Say, here it is. Send me $20 and
Yeah.
whatever, we'll send it.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Will do. Will do. Thank you so much again. This has been just, I can't even say.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We'll see everybody for Comics Karma in 2 weeks. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everybody who's here live.
Thank you.
Yeah, and come find us. All right, have fun. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. This has been a production of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find us on social media at Comics Workshop and online at sawcomics.org. There you can also hear about our many courses and intensives and in-person programs. SAW is a non-profit supported by people like you. Learn how to make a tax-deductible donation at the donate page of sawcomics.org. You can join our free community of comics explorers at members.sawcomics.org. Thanks so much for being here.